Coming up on this Thursday edition of Daybreak, the group of South Korean lawmakers who visited the inter-Korean Gaeseong Industrial Complex in the north have called on the two Koreas to better cooperate to further develop and internationalize the business park. It was a clear victory for the ruling party in Wednesday's by-elections, with President Park Geun-hye's key aide, Suh Chung-won, making a comeback to parliament. The victory means the opposition's allegations of meddling in last year's presidential election are likely to lose momentum. Plus, in a widely expected move, the US Federal Reserve decides to keep its massive bond-buying stimulus program intact, citing signs of only a moderate recovery. Daybreak begins now.
You're watching Daybreak on Thursday, October 31st. I'm Doosan in Seoul. We begin with a cross-border visit by a group of South Korean lawmakers to the Inter-Korean Joint Business Park in North Korea. The bipartisan delegation spent a day at the Gaeseong Industrial Complex as part of an annual government audit. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports.
A 21-member delegation from the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee made a rare visit to the Gaeseong Industrial Complex on Wednesday. The trip marks the first time lawmakers have visited the Joint Business Park under the Park Geun-hye administration and was part of the Parliament's ongoing annual audit of the government. It was a full day that included a briefing on the current state of the complex, a tour of the factories and facilities, as well as a meeting with South Korean businessmen with operations there. Upon returning, the lawmakers said the trip was very productive.
There were many practical and useful discussions when we got a chance to chat with the resident companies in Gaeseong. All the information will be discussed at the two-day parliamentary audit starting tomorrow, and we will hold additional discussions on issues that require additional review.
Operations at Gaeseong came to a halt in April when North Korea pulled all of its workers out amid an escalation in inter-Korean tensions. The factories began running again in September after Pyongyang promised to prevent future unilateral closures following a series of talks between the two Koreas. Noting the significance of the Gaeseong complex in inter-Korean relations, the lawmakers pledged to cooperate on issues regarding the normalization of the industrial zone, sparking hope for progress on Seoul's efforts to revitalize the business park. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Officials from South Korea and the United States launched a sixth round of military cost-sharing talks on Wednesday. Seoul's Foreign Ministry Special Envoy Hwang Jun-guk and his U.S. counterpart Eric John locked horns over the issue of cost-sharing of hosting U.S. troops on the peninsula for the next 5 years. Seoul has put aside some $820 million for its share of the cost for 2014, while the U.S. is requesting at least $940 million. They also discussed ways to improve the current system for monitoring each side's spending. The two sides have been unable to narrow their differences in 5 rounds of talks since July. The sixth round will run through Thursday. Korea's industrial output suffered its biggest drop in 6 months in September, dragged down by a temporary downing of tools at some of the nation's automakers. Our Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
It was a reminder that the country's still feeble economic recovery could be derailed by an unforeseen shock. Statistics Korea said Wednesday that the nation's industrial output dropped 2.1% in September from the previous month, the sharpest pace of contraction in 6 months. The drop was a reversal from a 1.6% rise in August. The statistics agency, however, attributed the fall to partial strikes by unionized workers at local automakers Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors, and added that without that factor, the nation's industrial output would have expanded for the month of September as well. Economists agree that the drop in output does not indicate a major setback for the Korean economy.
Overall, the numbers show that the Korean economy is on the path to recovery after sluggish growth over the past 2 years. but it's still hard to say the recovery is at full strength.
The output of services sector that is driven by domestic demand kept improving last month, gaining by 0.3% from August. Despite the worse than expected output data, the central bank said last week that the nation's gross domestic product grew 3.3% in the July to September period, from a year earlier, the first time it has topped 3% since the end of 2011. On a brighter note, the central bank survey showed Wednesday that Korean manufacturers' confidence rose to a 16-month high in October based on their assessment of the business outlook for the coming months. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Korea's IT exports are growing at a fast pace, with the amount in the first 9 months of the year reaching nearly $100 billion. That's up more than 9% from the same period last year and far outstrips to the 1.3% growth of all exports in the same period, according to the Institute for International Trade on Wednesday. Exports of semiconductors, telecommunications devices, and printed circuit boards rose by the biggest margin. Most exports were bound for China, Vietnam, and Hong Kong, but shipments to the United States and Japan declined. Moving now to the finance minister's warning about the nation's economy. Despite the recent flurry of positive data, Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok says it's still too early to be optimistic about an economic recovery. Our Yuna reports.
The Korean government appears determined to spur efforts to accelerate the nation's economic recovery. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok told a meeting of economic ministers on Wednesday that improving economic indicators released recently are not strong and extensive enough to remain optimistic about future economic performances. Those indicators included a better-than-expected 3.3% GDP growth in the third quarter, a large current account surplus that has stayed in the black for the past 20 months, and an improving consumer confidence level that hit a 17-month high in October. The finance minister said external uncertainties, particularly over the timing of the U.S. tapering of its stimulus programs and toughening competition with countries like China and Japan, are potential factors that could hurt Korea's recovery, making new investments and job creation more essential for a full-blown recovery. Promising steps to streamline red tapes, Hyun said 1,800 businesses will begin benefiting from a government fund that offers soft loans to startups in the next 2 months. The finance ministry also announced tax incentive to help expedite investment. Small and medium-sized companies will have their tariffs reduced by as much as 20 percentage points for machinery imports and enjoy greater accounting flexibility in handling depreciating costs to help reduce tax payments until next March. Yurian, Arirang News.
Korea's ruling Saenuri Party swept to victory in both of Wednesday's by-elections, which were seen as a key test of public sentiment toward the Park Geun-hye administration. Analysts expect the strong showing to bring about a major power shift within the party and in parliament. Our political correspondent Kim Hyun-ji reports.
The Hwaseong-A district in Gyeonggi Province and the South Poang-Ulleung Island district in North Gyeongsang Province have elected new representatives. Both regions are considered traditional strongholds of the conservative ruling Saenuri Party, and the ruling party's candidates won the elections by large margins. The Hwaseong-A constituency had a vacant seat in the National Assembly after the death of ruling party lawmaker Ko Hee-sun in August. On Wednesday, voters in the district elected Suh Chung-won of the ruling party as its new representative. Suh, a former 6-term lawmaker, garnered more than 60% of the votes, followed by Oh Il-yong of the main opposition Democratic Party with roughly 30%. The seat in the South Poang-Ulleung constituency was open because Kim Young-tae, formerly of the ruling party, was found guilty of illegal campaigning and lost his seat in July. In this district, Bang Myung-jae, former Minister of Public Administration, won the election with roughly 80% support, beating Heo Dae-man of the main opposition Democratic Party by a large margin. Observers say the outcome of the by-election is sure to bring about a major power shift within the ruling party. With Wednesday's victory, the ruling party's Suh Chung-won will enter the National Assembly as a 7th-term lawmaker. Suh, who's considered one of the closest allies of President Park Geun-hye, outranks two key pro-Park figures, Representatives Kim Moo-sung and Choi Kyung-hwan, in terms of seniority, which tends to carry significant weight in Korean politics. Lawmaker Kim Moo-sung is serving his 5th term, while Choi Kyung-hwan, who's the floor leader of the ruling party at the moment, is serving his 3rd term. The main opposition Democratic Party, which had urged voters to sound an alarm on the Park Geun-hye administration during the campaigning by voting for their candidates, said it humbly accepted the election results and would seek to reform the party to be more competitive in future elections. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
President Park is expected to make a policy speech at the National Assembly sometime in mid-November. The senior presidential secretary for public relations told reporters Wednesday that the ruling and opposition parties are currently discussing a new schedule for her speech. A presidential policy speech usually focuses on the budget for the coming year. But this year, with the rival parties still divided on a controversial probe over illegal electioneering by the nation's spy agency, there's speculation President Park might include political topics in her speech as well.
If you want the latest news from Korea and around the world.
Return to the negotiations.
President Park Geun-hye plans, given the current circumstances.
On your way to work or at home.
Defense Ministry. The legislature will convene a.
Tune into Daybreak on Arirang TV.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Tuesday. In a move that was widely expected, the U.S. Federal Reserve has decided to keep the country's stimulus measures steady as they go, maintaining its policy and economic outlook basically unchanged. The Fed announced on Wednesday that its Federal Open Market Committee voted to keep interest rates at record lows and press ahead with the $85 billion a month bond buying stimulus program, which has been in place for more than a year now. The Fed said the U.S. economy continues to grow at a moderate pace, but it needs more proof the nation's recovery is gaining strength before it starts reining in the stimulus program. Turning now to the latest development in the U.S. spying scandal. New reports claim the U.S. spied on the Vatican in the run-up to the conclave to elect a new pope. Italian magazine Panorama, which cites no source for its information, says the National Security Agency eavesdropped on phone calls to and from the Vatican up until March when Pope Francis was elected. These calls were allegedly among the 46 million telephone calls the NSA tapped in Italy between December of 2012 and January of this year. Responding to the claims, the Vatican said it has no evidence its calls were monitored by the NSA, and even if they were, it had no concerns about it. The latest claims come as German officials are at the White House to address allegations Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone was tapped by the NSA. A former U.S. official has urged the Japanese Prime Minister to refrain from visiting the controversial Yasukuni shrine, which honors Japan's war dead. In a video message sent to a forum in Tokyo, the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, Kirk Campbell, said that if Shinzo Abe were to pay respects at the war shrine, it would destabilize Japan's relations with Korea and China. There's growing speculation Abe may visit Yasukuni in late December for the first time as Prime Minister to mark his first year in office. He has so far made 3 offerings to the shrine in the past year. Yasukuni honors Japan's war dead, including 14 Class A war criminals, and visits to the shrine by Japanese politicians and lawmakers are seen as a glorification of the country's imperialistic past. And back here in the nation, Korea's Culture Ministry and Google are joining hands to bring Korean culture ranging from K-pop to traditional cultural contents to people around the world. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won reports.
Korean Culture Minister Yoo Jin-young and Google CEO Eric Schmidt said Wednesday the Korean government and Google will work together to bring Korean cultural content online. Schmidt also said Google will provide financial support to the Hangul Museum, set to open next year, but did not specify the amount. The announcement was made at a press conference at the Hangul Museum in Seoul on Wednesday.
I believe that Google will be a great help to us and that we can contribute to Google. This is just the beginning of what I hope will be a bigger partnership between our two institutions.
The Korean culture spans 5,000 years, 6,000 years, a long, long time. Google is very old. Google is 15 years old, right? So as a respectful but ambitious teenager, it's a pleasure for me to learn from both the richness of Korea's culture, but also to help share it with the rest of the world.
Google has been adding cultural content from Korea to its online platforms since 2011, with everything from K-pop concerts and films to modern and traditional art. For example, people can see cultural heritage items from the National Museum of Korea online. Amid the collaboration between the Korean government and the search engine, the Google Cultural Institute, which displays the cultural assets from more than 300 institutions from 44 countries, ranging from architecture to art, recently launched new partnerships with 4 Korean cultural institutions, including the Korea Database Agency and the Lee Young-hee Korea Museum. Through the Google Cultural Institute collection, anyone with internet access can now appreciate the beauty of the traditional clothing and houses known as hanbok and hanok. Altogether, the site will display some 10,000 Korean cultural items.
The government expects the collaboration with Google to help carry Korean cultural content from K-pop to more traditional arts to more people around the world. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we kick things off with domestic baseball as Game 6 of the 2013 Korean Series between the Doosan Bears and the Samsung Lions is set to take place later tonight. With the best-of-7 series coming back to Daegu, the Doosan Bears still have a 3-2 series lead after sweeping the first 2 games of the series. However, with Samsung finding their hitting once again, the momentum has shifted over to the Samsung Lions. Now, Game 6 starters will be Dustin Nipper for the Doosan Bears, who's been strong against the Samsung Lions in the past, including the 1-run effort in Game 2. Meanwhile, for the Samsung Lions, Rick Vandenhurk, who came into relief in Game 5, will still take the mound as he hopes to send the series to Game 7. And moving over to some Wednesday night KBL action, we had 2 games that took place last night. So let's start things off with Jeonju KCC Aegis taking on Wonju Dongbu Promi. Of course, going into the game here, first quarter of the game, Dongbu's Park Ji-hyun leading the way with 8 points in the quarter as Dongbu takes a slim 21-17 lead before KCC cuts the deficit in the second quarter as Dongbu takes a 41-39 lead after the first half. Second half, KCC making it interesting as Dongbu takes a 1-point lead going into the fourth quarter. But fourth quarter comes along and KCC penetrating Dongbu's defense, including Darian Towns, who would finish off with 20 points and 12 rebounds as KCC storms back to take this game 78-67. And next up, Anyang KGC taking on Incheon Itilan Elephants. First quarter, KGC takes a slim 20-17 lead before Incheon dominates KGC with their defense as Incheon turns the tide and takes a 30-29 lead after the first half. Second half, KGC continues to struggle from the field and Incheon continues to run away with the game. Big fourth quarter from Ricardo Powell, scoring 11 of his 22 points in the fourth quarter as Incheon cruises through 63-53, your final score. All right, moving over to some Wednesday's K-League Classic action. This time as Gangwon FC beat the struggling Seongnam Ilhwa Cheonma 2-1. Gyeongnam FC all over Jeonnam Dragons 4-2, and Jeonbuk beats Busan in a close one 3-2. So with that said, let's take a look at a couple of matches here. Starting off with FC Seoul taking on Ulsan Hyundai Tigers. Of course, going into the match here, both sides trying to score the first goal of the match, but they're evenly matched as the first half of the match ends in a 0-0 draw. But in the second half of the match, in the 49th minute, here's Ulsan's big man, Kim Shi-nook, scores the first goal of the match, and Ulsan takes a 1-0 lead. Meanwhile, Dejan Damjanovic tried to equalize for FC Seoul, but fails to score in the game as the match turns quite aggressive with 30 fouls being committed. But either way, Ulsan manages to hold on and take 3 points with the 1-0 victory. All right, moving on, the Pohang Steelers taking on Incheon United. Both sides looking quite aggressive in the first half of the match, but this match also goes scoreless in the first half. But as soon as the second half starts, it's Moon Sang-yoon for Incheon. Check this out. Pokes this one in, finds the back of the net in the 46th minute, and it's 1-0 Incheon. A lot of time left on the clock, but check this one out. Wide open, Ko Moo-yeol in the 60th minute. That's the equalizer, and it's now 1-1. Both sides trying to get the 3 points in this match, but Shin Young-jun in the 87th. That's the game winner. Pohang takes this game 2-1 as they remain in second place. All right, finishing things off, Wednesday was minus 100 days until the 2014 Sochi Winter Games, which is why a press conference was held with the athletes here in the nation. But of course, all the focus was on the current health status of figure queen Kim Yuna, who injured her right foot during training. Now, she did state that while she isn't 100% just yet, she is getting better and can even make jumps now during practice. Meanwhile, she plans to return to ice in December in a B-class competition. And that is going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your latest weather forecast. Well, it's the last day of October, and thankfully a decent afternoon is in progress as we turn towards November. But this morning, we're having one of the coldest mornings of this season so far. It's a very cold start, so please dress warmly before heading out. But afternoon highs should be similar to yesterday with a good amount of sunshine. But right now, it looks like the peninsula is filled with clouds down in the south, but as we heading into the afternoon, increasing sunshine will dominate the peninsula. Well, tonight is a big night for the baseball games here in Korea. Some of you might travel to Daegu to see a 2013 Korean series between the Doosan Bears and the Samsung Lions this evening, and I've got a good news for you. No worries with the weather for the baseball game tonight. It will be mostly clear evening. Temperatures down in Daegu will be a tad milder than here in the capital, but still make sure to dress in layers not to get sick. With that in mind, it's time to take a look at the readings for today. So Daegu temperatures will be mild enough, so you're going to enjoy your baseball game, and here are the readings for today. Seoul will start off at 5, and current temperature is about 7 degrees Celsius, but afternoon high will be hiking up to 16 degrees Celsius, which is 61 degrees in Fahrenheit, and Daegu and Gwangju will make it to 20, while Busan hikes up to 21. And it looks like down in Jeju and Daejeon will have a similar afternoon highs at 19, while Mount Kumgang will wake up to freezing morning at -5. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the global forecast for viewers around the world. That's all for me at this hour. Enjoy your morning commute and hope you have a wonderful day.
And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Thank you for watching.